The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news at 6 comes to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken KFC. With the news at this time, I'm Dennis Chabrol. Good evening. First, the highlights. Spending of millions of dollars to buy supplies for the forensic laboratory has come under scrutiny by the Parliamentary Public Accounts Committee. Guyana hopes to eliminate 5 infectious diseases with help from the Pan American Health Organization. Regionally, Trinidad and Tobago says it is watching the supply of wheat on the international market. And St. Martin is lifting its mask mandate. We get the details also from the BBC about the Ukraine-Russia war. The details of these and other stories coming up.
Hit to stand in lines? Don't worry. KFC has got you covered with their drive-thrus, which are open now from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. at Movietown, Vlissingen Road, Mandela Avenue, Reading Hoop, Parika, and the Amazonia Mall. That's right, you can drive through at 6 of their 9 locations. Remember, their current opening hours are 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. Go on down and let your taste buds savor the spices today. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
And now the news in detail. Questions were mainly raised about the procurement of almost $17 million in drugs and medical supplies for the Guyana Forensic Laboratory. At a hearing of the Public Accounts Committee, PAC, an audit director at the Auditor General's office, Audrey Badley, said not all of the items had been supplied in 2017.
The contract was awarded in the sum of $16.9 million, and the full amount was paid to the supplier. Now, in September of 2018, only $6 million of supplies were received. So the supplier failed to provide all the items at that time. So the full amount was paid to the contractor, but he failed to deliver all the items.
The PSC hearing was told that the remainder of the items had been delivered in 2019. Acting chairman of the PSC, Ganesh Mahipal, said if the discrepancy had been identified, it should have been kept on the radar all the time.
If we were examining these years as for year, as opposed to how we have merged these two here, 2017 we would have found this issue and we would have drilled it as we are right now in 2018. And when we come to 2018 report, we would not have seen it repeating itself when in actuality the items were delivered in 2019. So the aid report should have flagged it as an issue still. Am I correct, Ms. Badley?
Yes, Chairman, you are correct.
The PSC also heard from the Principal Assistant Secretary of Finance that $14.7 million worth of items had been supplied to the Guyana Forensic Laboratory and $2.7 million had been refunded. Private sector businesses across the Caribbean community are being encouraged to invest in ocean-going transportation. This is against the background of the need for cheaper transportation of agricultural produce and products in the region to help reduce CARICOM's food import bill. President Irfan Ali, who is responsible for agriculture in CARICOM's quasi-cabinet, says businesses are being invited to invest in cargo transportation services.
Very important is the issue of transportation and logistics, and we have decided that we're going to make a call to the private sector through an expression of interest for a finance and operate, manage proposals for the movement of cargo, people, vehicles. And we've also decided that as part of that investment forum, every country will give a list of incentives that they will give towards an investment like this that would bring a solution to the transport and logistics hurdle that we face as a region for intra-regional trade.
President Irfan Ali, transportation has historically been a major constraint for the agricultural sector development across the Caribbean community. The Pan American Health Organization and Guyana are teaming up to eliminate 5 neglected infectious diseases. Overall, there are 20 disease groups in 42 countries that the World Health Organization wants to eliminate over the next 10 years. Statistics show that more than 1 billion persons are infected by these diseases. In Guyana, Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony says filaria, chagas, leishmania, leprosy, and the soil-transmitted elements that cause anemia are in Guyana. He says that overall, Guyana has been doing well in keeping the prevalence of these diseases very low.
So with the big 5, I think, it is not as bad as maybe some of the other regions of the world, because they are affecting relatively small numbers of people, with exceptions of the soil-transmitted elements. But outside of that, I think the numbers are really small. And I therefore believe that we'll be able to resolve a lot of these problems in a faster time. So even this 5-year duration that we have, I think we can do it much faster if we have that concentrated focus.
The health minister is urging participants to at the same time tackle other health-related issues such as dengue and snake bites.
Now, outside of these, we still have some other issues. And maybe while it might not be the core neglected infections that we're talking about, since these 5 might not be so challenging, we perhaps need to add some more. And so I want to ask you also to perhaps start thinking about what we can do with dengue, because it's still a challenge for us here in the country. Very often we hear of persons getting infected, and we perhaps need to think seriously to have a more robust program of trying to reduce the burden of dengue in Guyana. So that's something that maybe we should put on our radar.
Health Minister Dr. Frank Anthony. President Irfan Ali appears to be hinging any chance of power sharing to the opposition agreeing to free and fair elections. This is just days after the People's National Congress Reform PNCR leader Aubrey Norton pegged it to a clean voters list. This is against the background of a United States Agency for International Development USAID-funded report recommending that Guyana should move towards power sharing in order to manage the country's oil wealth efficiently. Dr. Ali recalls that the international community had also cited the need for democracy.
The same entire international community spoke about the attempts to rig an election, spoke about the attempt to steal democracy from the people of this country. Let's fix that first. Let us fix that. Let us rid ourselves of these monsters in society who would want to take away our democracy, the rule of law, and rig elections. The days for those are gone. And we must fix that. Let's start from there. Let's start fixing that.
The president's position follows last week's pronouncement by PNCR leader Aubrey Norton. He has singled out the need for an acceptable voters list as a condition for negotiating power sharing.
For instance, I do not see us getting into any serious dialogue if we cannot agree on a new voters list, a clean voters list. The basis of democratic elections is a clean voters list. And so even if you're going to share government after, if you don't have a clean list and an election that is considered credible, then you will still have problems. So there are a number of issues we have to deal with.
The PNCR-led coalition of a Partnership for National Unity plus Alliance for Change, APNU-AFC, and the governing People's Progressive Party, Civic, continue to accuse each other of rigging the March 2020 general elections. The international community, including Western nations, Caribbean and extra-regional observer missions, had cited manipulation of results for Region 4 in favor of APNU-AFC. Several now former GCOM and PNCR officials are before the court on charges of electoral fraud. The PNCR leader says his party welcomes the views in the USAID report. The health ministry says the number of COVID-19 patients who are receiving intensive care have dropped to 5. Official figures also show that 7 new cases have been recorded within the past 24 hours. Overall, 14 persons are hospitalized and 206 have been ordered to isolate themselves at home. The death toll so far since the pandemic began in March 2020 is 1,223. President Irfan Ali had said that more COVID-19 measures will be relaxed. Already, the curfew has been discontinued, and he says incoming passengers no longer needed to submit COVID location forms to the health desk. Turning to news now from the Caribbean, Barbados' Prime Minister Mia Mottley is visiting the West African nation of Ghana. She thanked Ghana for having the courage to go out on its own as a republic, saying it was such actions that could lead more small island developing states to also take the plunge. She also expects ties between African countries and CARICOM member states to become even stronger in the coming years. Ms. Motley made the comments while delivering the feature address at Ghana's 65th independence anniversary celebrations early Sunday morning. Ghana is celebrating its 65th independence from Britain. With the war raging between Ukraine and Russia, two of the world's largest producers of wheat, Trinidad and Tobago's national flour mills has said its priority is securing enough of the grain to supply the country and admits it will have to make decisions if the price continues to rise. In an interview with the Guardian media, its CEO Ian Mitchell acknowledges that a shortage of wheat in Europe will trickle down to the rest of the world. He says the NFM stocks are in a good position for the next 2 months, as it has quite been. I beg your pardon. He says the NFM's stocks are in a good position for the next 2 months, as it has quite a bit of storage. He says the company does not have to go back out to the market immediately. He also explains, however, that the NFM does not wait until stocks are depleting to replenish. He says coming closer to the end of March, the company will have a better idea about where the prices will be. He reiterates that the company's priority will be to secure wheat to ensure that if there is an availability issue, the NFM is pretty much covered. And if the situation worsens, then the national flour mills will have to do some evaluation. According to the CEO, wheat prices have gone up by over $10 a bushel, which included all strains of wheat. He said while the company does not buy European wheat, all of the wheat produced worldwide supplies the international market. Another factor the company continues to monitor is the cost of freight and transportation, which have already affected global suppliers due to the war. St. Martin will from next week Tuesday relax the use of masks. SMS News reports that Health and Labour Minister Omar Otley says St. Martin has recorded a 1% infectious rate over the last week. He says this is significantly lower than the World Health Organization's recommended threshold of a 5% infectious rate. The minister states that this puts St. Martin in the low-risk category, and so the mask mandate has been relaxed from code red to code green from Tuesday, March 15. The minister also states that given the country's current status, he'll advise that a 3 a.m. business closure be lifted. This is another step towards its normalcy strategy in St. Martin. He says establishments will still reserve the right to request a mask to enter the premises, but there will be no penalties from government inspectors if no mask is worn in such establishments. Antigua and Barbuda's National Office of Disaster Services, NODS, is encouraging participation in the annual tsunami exercise Carib Wave on Thursday. The exercise is testing aspects of tsunami readiness throughout the region. This activity is conducted by the Intergovernmental Coordination Group for Tsunami and Other Coastal Hazards Warning System for the Caribbean and adjacent regions associated with UNESCO. That's the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. The March 10 tsunami exercise is coordinated with the Barbados-based Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, SEDEMA, the regional body responsible for disaster management. The threat of tsunamis to the region is real, and there have been significant efforts by disaster personnel to enhance tsunami preparedness in Antigua and Barbuda and the rest of the region. Several areas in Antigua have been declared tsunami ready through a UNESCO program. There are St. John City and the districts of St. John City South and St. John City West. Colombian President Iván Duque on Monday said any solution for Venezuela's future must come through genuine, transparent presidential elections. A top delegation from the U.S. government traveled to Caracas since the weekend to talk with Maduro and other Venezuelan officials about the possibility of easing U.S. oil sanctions. The U.S. wanted an exchange for a series of demands, including President Maduro's condemnation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The first high-level bilateral talks between the United States and Venezuela in years caught Venezuela's opposition led by Juan Guaido almost off guard, as his interim government, recognized by Colombia and the United States, was notified at the last minute. U.S. and Venezuelan officials made scant progress towards a deal in a Saturday meeting at the presidential palace that was full of maximalist demands, according to a source close to the talks. This reflected long-time tensions between the Western Hemisphere's main power and one of its biggest ideological foes. Washington is seeking to separate Russia from one of its key allies while securing alternative oil supplies in case wider sanctions are imposed on Russia's energy sector. If U.S. trading oil sanctions on Venezuela in effect since 2019 were lifted, the OPEC member nation could potentially increase exports. Now we go to the BBC World Service for the latest bulletin of international news.
BBC News, hello, I'm Gareth Barlow. Ukrainian rescue workers say at least 13 people were killed when an airstrike hit an industrial bakery west of Kyiv. More than 30 people are believed to have been in the vicinity of the plant in the town of Makariv. Ukraine's foreign ministry says Russia has continued to shell numerous other cities, preventing the evacuation of the civilian population. Negotiations to agree evacuation routes broke down after Russia said it would open humanitarian corridors leading to its own territory or to Belarus. In the eastern city of Dnipro, many there are trying to flee to the west. From Dnipro, here's Sarah Rainsford.
There is no timetable at Dnipro station. No one knows when the trains will run or where they're going to. But the crowds now turn out every morning at first light and queue for hours in the snow for a chance of a ride west to safety. It's only the women and children who get through, though. We saw police pulling men of fighting age out of the line, forcing them to say their goodbyes. It feels like half this city is now clearing out. After watching the fighting to the north, south and east, many have decided it's time to leave here.
The United Nations head of humanitarian affairs has called on all parties to allow safe passage for civilians fleeing the war. Martin Griffiths told an emergency meeting of the Security Council in New York that civilians should be allowed to leave in whatever direction they choose.
The parties need to take constant care to spare civilians and civilian homes and infrastructure in their military operations. This includes allowing safe passage for civilians to leave areas of active hostilities on a voluntary basis in the direction they choose. All civilians, whether they stay or leave, must be respected and protected.
Mr. Griffiths also called for safe passage to allow the UN to deliver desperately needed aid. The head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog has expressed hope that Russia and Ukraine will accept his offer for security talks. The Director General of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, said it was absolutely unacceptable that no normal operation was in place at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant, which was seized by Russian troops last week. On the diplomatic front, the Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu says his Russian and Ukrainian counterparts, Sergei Lavrov and Dmitry Kuleba, will meet in Turkey later this week. Meanwhile, a third round of talks between Ukrainian and Russian delegations has broken up in Belarus. Meanwhile, the French President Emmanuel Macron has said it's important that diplomatic efforts do continue.
The discussion with President Putin is difficult because today he refuses the ceasefire and because today Russia is taking a very simple position, which is to ask Ukraine for very harsh conditions. And this is a discussion between the Ukrainians and the Russians, but it is taking place in very unfair conditions.
World News from the BBC. Sudanese security forces have raided the offices of an independent committee that was investigating the shooting dead of more than 100 demonstrators in 2019. The lawyer heading the committee said the offices had been taken over by security forces, who then blocked people from retrieving documents. It's the second such committee to be targeted in Sudan since a coup last year. Frequent protests have been taking place to demand a return to civilian rule and justice for those killed in earlier demonstrations. The UN Human Rights Chief has said that conditions in northern Ethiopia have worsened significantly since November, with widespread violations including airstrikes and hundreds of rapes. Michelle Bachelet was addressing the Geneva-based Human Rights Council.
Multiple airstrikes apparently carried out by the Ethiopian Air Force, ETAF, in Tigray and to a lesser extent in Afar resulted in civilian death and casualties and the destruction of civilian property. The office has recorded 304 killings and injuries to 373 people resulting from aerial bombardments during the reporting period.
British scientists say they've identified 16 new genetic variants in COVID DNA that helps their understanding of why some infected people are predisposed to severe illness and others go symptom-free. Some of the variants relate to blood clotting, immune response and severe inflammation. It's hoped the findings will spur more accurate diagnoses of COVID. And the Supreme Court in Namibia has ruled that the government discriminated against a gay couple when it denied residency to the Mexican partner of a gay Namibian man. The court ordered the Home Affairs Ministry to reconsider the application of Guillermo Delgado. The government had refused to give legal recognition to Mr. Delgado's marriage to Philip Lull, a Namibian. The country automatically grants permanent residency to foreigners married to local people, but same-sex marriages are not legally recognised and homosexuality is illegal. BBC News.
And just before we bring you a recap of the highlights, news just coming to hand, the Guyana Power and Light says that its operational costs are soaring as a result of the war between Russia and Ukraine. The company is urging customers to ensure that they conserve electricity because of the high price of landed fuel. The Guyana Power and Light says in a statement that currently, the cost of landed fuel is $140 per barrel, and this means that it has quadrupled from 2016, when the fuel price was approximately $30 per barrel. According to the GPL, international indicators point to further price increases. The power company says that it currently utilizes approximately 3,700 barrels of fuel daily for electricity generation to meet the demand daily, at a cost of approximately $111.5 million Guyana dollars. This increase, the company says, has moved the GPL's total monthly operating expenses to approximately $4.5 billion against monthly electricity sales of approximately $3 billion. The power company says this means the GPL has to use every dollar it collects to meet its operating expenditure. The financial challenging position, according to the power company, cannot be sustained at current fuel prices. The Guyana Power and Light made no mention of an increase in tariffs for consumers. And that's the news to the moment.
KFC delivery is now available from the Amazonia location. For shore-based Little Diamond residents, call 632-0533, 632-0533, 6080-162, 6080-162, or 503-3591, 503-3591. That's KFC's delivery service from the Amazonia location. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
And now a recap of the highlights. The Guyana Power and Light says its operations are severely impacted by increased fuel prices due to the war between Ukraine and Russia. Spending of millions of dollars to buy supplies for the forensic laboratory has come under scrutiny by the Parliamentary Public Accounts Committee. Guyana hopes to eliminate 5 infectious diseases with help from the Pan American Health Organization. And regionally, Trinidad and Tobago says it is watching the supply of wheat on the international market. And St. Martin is lifting its mask mandate. The news came to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.